So the astrology of the week of 17 January 2022 through 23 January 2022. This week it's all about the lights, these lights in the sky, what astrologers call the lights, or more accurately put, maybe for common nomenclature, the sun and the moon, the luminaries, those large objects of light in the sky. All of the activity this week is dealing with those lights, and so it's a really nice time to consider the power of the sun and the moon on the reality. We get this week the first full moon since Jupiter has entered Pisces, and the first full moon of 2022. And so it's a climax of sorts for this beginning, opening of the year, healing, homing, forgiveness, all of these themes of kind of emotionality and the benefits of, emotional connection and connection to ourselves come into play this week. Let's get into these charts. Let's get into the week. My name is S.J. Anderson, astrologer S.J. Anderson. Welcome here to my channel. Very happy that you're here, and I'm very happy to be discussing yet another week of astrology. Always a lot happening, and there's always a symbolically rich, a depth of rich symbols from which to be inspired by. And every week when I prepare these talks, I'm always surprised. It's like, wow, this is happening. This very cool, very potent symbol set is upon us for another week ahead, and this week is no different. I want to just start out here by saying that, this week is all about the sun and the moon, and just take a little bit of time to reflect on the power of the sun and the moon. We sort of can get lost sometimes as astrologers with really using the sun and the moon, or at least I know I can, and I think some of it comes from the ancient texts where the sun and the moon played a certain role, but the other planets, and most importantly the two malefic planets, Saturn and Mars, and the two so-called benefic planets, Jupiter and Venus, those planets are really the planets that ancient astrologers would look to for influence in the sky. So benefic planets are the planets assigned to adding great value via aspect or rulership. Jupiter, the hopes and dreams. Venus, maybe more the pleasures and the beauty and the creativity. Whereas the malefics were the planets assigned with, changing the other planets that they're configured to or that they rule in harsher ways. But the sun and moon often aren't seen as planets that are making these kind of sweeping influences. And I think you see this most interestingly in like the Egyptian terms, the rulership scheme that I talk about so often. The sun and moon don't get a role. The sun and moon don't have power degrees assigned to them in the Egyptian term scheme. And when you look at these ancient authors, they talk about the sun and moon being rulers of the whole. And that is to say, there are these kind of key components that are almost operating a higher level, or a level of the whole, whereas the other planets are these sub-levels of influence. And so it's good just to consider that this week, when the sun and moon are so active in the sky via aspect and via everything that they're doing, that we're dealing with kind of the essential components, the essential parts of the astrological system, and really of the reality. You go outside, the sun came out earlier today here, and I've got some curtains, but it got bright. I could feel the power of that sun through like multiple levels of things that were a bit in between me and the sun. It felt good and hot. I remember I was thinking, wow, this feels really, really good. And I'm, effectively hidden from it in this apartment. But that's the power of the sun, the power of the moon, if you've ever seen it. You walk out in that big full moon rising, which we have this week, Monday night, Sunday night, you'll be able to see that growing, waxing, large moon in Cancer. But it's really awe-inducing. You look up and it's like a big light. They are like lamps or bulbs. And the size of the sun and the moon are different than every other planet. That's another big distinction. You have the 5 smaller, star-like objects, and then you have this large, circular, light-producing objects that are the sun and the moon. And so, there's something here about if we have 7 traditional, 2 of them have this special quality, and then the 5 have these other qualities. And so there's this kind of 2-5 ratio within the 7. I'll just say this here because it's interesting. Stanley Kubrick was apparently using this 2-5 ratio symbolically in a few of his films. I'd seen something on the internet about that recently, and I thought instantly that's the luminaries and the 5 traditional, the 2 and the 7. So anyhow, I don't, by way of introduction, that's just kind of what I wanted to ground us into thinking about this week, are these large lights in the sky that are kind of the fundament of our astrological system. And really, what's the fundament of our life? It's the consciousness and the body. That's what the sun and moon represent. And so this week, maybe there's a sense of grounding into some more fundamental questions about who we are and what we want in 2022 and in the future as we kind of plow into the future. So, Jupiter's now settling into Pisces. It's there moving through quite fast. And I hope you're enjoying it. I know I am. I think I'm having a lot of just a little chaotic, more chaotic than I had hoped, but at the same time, it does feel there's some rest and pause and cleansing and clearing. So, I guess that's what I would just say with the introduction. There's going to be a lot more to talk about related to these themes. And so I'll save it for the actual content of the talk. I mean, this introduction is kind of putting us into context. I mean, the other big thing, and we're going to talk all about it this week, the things I want to talk about in the introduction are actually happening this week. So it's kind of a difficult bridge to gap there, or gap to bridge. But it's just the nodes, the lunar nodes, and how they're shifting signs this week. It's a very big shift. Every 18 months they change signs. These are the true lunar nodes now. And so both the mean nodes and the true nodes will now be fully established after this week in Taurus and Scorpio. And it's a huge, huge shift. The more that I practiced astrology, the more that I have practiced, the more that the nodes themselves become almost essential for every reading I do. They have to be discussed, and so often where they are really define what people tell me that is going on in their lives. And so you can put me in that camp of a nodal astrologer or someone who's very heavily influenced by the nodal transits. It's a big, 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 big part of all, like I said, my astrology and the readings that I do. So I don't know if there's much more to say. Maybe we should just shift and dive in, because that is going to open up a lot more about a lot more of what I want to say about the topics I've already raised. So okay, let's just shift over here. I'm starting here with the week of aspects, and we start the week on the 17th. It's the 18th at right after midnight here in Central Europe that we get that full moon. And it feels like this Cancer moon has been around already for a while, and it will stay around Sunday and then all day Monday and then into early Tuesday morning here in Central Europe. Remember, the moon is moving slow right now because it's at its apogee in terms of its circulation around Earth. Its orbit around Earth, the long side of its orbit, it's in now, and so that's why it's slower. But so we kind of climax here. We're slowing down, and this moon is really working its way through Cancer, which in some ways it's nice. We can take our time. I think the home life is a good thing to take our time with. Slow down in the home as much as possible. Slowly make the bed, slowly get into the bed and get under the covers and rest. And if you have loved ones, take time with them and with the touch and the kind of massage that can be so important and very lunar. I was thinking about this analogy with maternal instinct, and how there's a kind of a fierceness even with fighting to protect the offspring or the child. And mothers will do everything. They'll wake up every other hour, or 2 or 3 hours of sleep only to feed. When the child needs food, the mother is there with the teat ready to feed that child, or with the bottle. This is the kind of imperative of protection and nurture that the Cancerian energy can bring. And so we get this climax here right out of the gate this week, right after midnight in Central Europe, early Tuesday morning. And then we come that same day, so Tuesday later, all the way in the evening on Tuesday, right about 8 p.m. or 1949 in Central Europe, we get the nodes that are changing signs. And this is where I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, because my chart of the week is going to be this full moon chart that I want to dive in deeper. But this is what happens. The nodes are currently ruled by Jupiter and Mercury, planets that are of mutation, are of shift and change and alteration. Mercury, through detailed analysis, we say, no, that doesn't make sense. That phrase needs to be reorganized or re-edited. Mercury's powers are about changing and shifting and changing states, using language to change minds. It's about how thoughts can change reality. The magic of reality. This is Mercury. This is where the North Node has been in Gemini, ruled by Mercury. The south node has been in Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, which is also a planet of change. It's the great abundance, how when we grow things, it changes our, potential, and our visions for the future change. If you got an injection of cash, what you might choose to do over the next few weeks could change, or a few months or few years. And so it's the way that even hope and inspiration, can like change the attitude. This is very much Jupiter. It's like, well, I do feel hopeful and positive and confident, and I can go out and have a new vision for my life with these kind of Jupiterian upgrades or changes. Even in the more tangible sense, Jupiter representing lawyers or lawmakers or wealthy people, that you have access to Jupiter, you get new options or new ways to deal or face reality. So this is what the nodes, the eclipses, have been ruled by, these two planets. And the nodes have been ruled by these mutable Jupiter-Mercury energies. We've seen, I think, over the last 18 months, the ideas of reality, worldviews have been very much in play. I think a lot of people with the world events, when there's times of crisis in the world, it does sort of challenge our worldviews, our belief systems, and our information flows. All of that has been in play, I think, very tangibly over the last 18 months. But now that ends. So that's the big thing here. Tuesday, 8 p.m. roughly Central Europe, this is ending, finally. And we get now a full dose of the night signs, Taurus and Scorpio, ruled by Venus and Mars. And so the shift, where the eclipses want us to maybe focus, or where they're bringing us, if, we're kicking and screaming sometimes with eclipses and nodes. It's the kind of blind spot that they're there to expose and force us to take a deep dive into their themes. This is now centered around Venus and Mars. What are Venus and Mars? Well, they have a lot in common, Venus and Mars. They rule signs opposite each other. So Taurus is opposite Aries, Libra is opposite Aries, Taurus is opposite Scorpio. Both the signs that Venus and Mars rule are opposite the sign of Venus, or opposite each other. And so there's something embedded fundamentally in the symbolism of Venus and Mars of the opposite, the self and the other. Just like in the nativity, we have first house, seventh house, self, other. Well, Venus is one side, Mars is the other side. So it's relationship, it's the dynamic where you have the other that you can then interchange or engage with. And in the ancient texts, it's sex, they're sexual. Both the planets are planets of sexual activity of all kinds. Mars can be some of them maybe more, maybe less, basically it's sexual activity like adultery. Like the ancient texts give Mars a tough time. It's like, too much passion, too much desire, and the consequences that can come when that becomes unruly. Whereas Venus is more the kind of more formalized or more embedded in cultural norms and kind of safe ways to engage. But I don't, the ancient texts are often hyperbolic. I would just say that Mars maybe is the more kind of impassioned rush to wanting to join with another person, whereas Venus is maybe a slower paced and it's wanting to kind of settle in and rest in the kind of pleasurable side where there's no rush necessarily, and it's more contained, I think, within, it's more about the pacing, I think, for me with Venus and Mars. But they both imply joining physically, emotionally, mentally with other people, and especially when they're activated together, like they are when the nodes activate them because they enter this axis. And so the way I've been talking about this is that I believe over the next 18 months, it's really 2 years. The last eclipse will be a lunar eclipse in Taurus in October 2023. But we're going to have 2 years of the question emerging, who am I in relationships? What does it mean to love well? That's, I think, my favorite way to phrase it. Let me see if I had that written down here. No, I think it may be on another slide. But what does it mean to love well? What does it mean to have a relationship? Even breaking things, the nodes can break things down. They break down things to their essential nature. And sometimes we need that because we have ideas that could use upgrades or refreshing. And so that's what I would just consider the kind of relevant question. What does it mean to relate honestly, openly, and lovingly to people? And it doesn't have to be erotic. I mean, Mars and Venus do not have to be erotic. They can be all kinds of desires we have for other people. Hey, come play this with me, do this with me, spend time with me, watch this TV show with me, or whatever it is that you want people to do with you. That might be the Mars, and then what you like when they enter your space. I mean, that may be the Venus, but I think the ultimate spiritual octave of this transit and these questions are, what is love? What is connection and love? And how do you do it well? The martial side is that sometimes we need to maybe break out. You know, if you've ever been with someone for 2 or 3 days in a row, like a road trip is a perfect thing. You're driving with the same person for hours and hours. Eventually there's going to be a need to separate, go your own way, maybe take some time to recharge your own batteries independent of the person near you. And that's what Mars maybe can bring. It's like it's the connect, but then the separate. And so maybe it's like, how do you just love and balance? How do you be in relationship but still protect yourself? All of the questions of self, other, and relationship are very much in play over the next 2 years, really about 18, 19, 20 months now. And so I mean, this is a huge shift, and you may feel it palpably. Look to the sector of your chart where these nodes are now fully embedded in. You know, maybe if you're using a whole sign house system, it's a whole new house. Those house topics are now, you know, get ready to hang on, because you may be dealing with, you know, fated beginnings and endings. My favorite phrase, I say it all the time, around those house topics. And so, okay, let me see what I have here. This is the other thing about when I said the week's all about the sun and the moon. So Tuesday you have the full moon, that's the sun opposite moon. The same day, Tuesday later in the day, the nodes shift, but the nodes are about the sun and the moon too, because the ecliptic, which is the path of the sun from where we view it on Earth, and then the path of the moon. When they cross, those are the two nodes. And so the nodes are calculated based on the movement of the sun and the movement of the moon and the relationship to each other. And again, I go back to the beginning of the talk. This is what I was trying to raise in the introduction, is that the sun is the consciousness, the perceiver. It's the soul, maybe. The moon is the body. And you can think about this like ancient question of philosophers and artists and poets. Everybody's been trying to answer, you know, what is this union between soul and body? You know, the Mahayana Buddhists, emptiness and form, form and emptiness. You might think about the sun as emptiness in this context and the form as the moon. And, you know, they say it's the same, right? You have to have the container, the physical container for the seat of consciousness to embed itself in. But without that consciousness, the container is just a bag of bones or just a flesh. It would be like flesh being grown in a laboratory. Now, there's philosophies, and I kind of go with this, maybe some of the Hindu models or yogic models where you have, you know, God is in everything, even these inanimate objects. I kind of think that, but I do also think there's something about the sentient, animate soul of like the human consciousness or various animals. You can look at dogs. I see them where I live. There's a lot of stray dogs, and they're just so cool. You can see their eyes. They have a personality and a soul. There's this animation that's happening. And that may be the sun. And so when you combine the sun and the moon with the syzygy, whether that's a new moon or a full moon like we have this week on Tuesday, early morning, or when the nodes, at these points where the sun and moon cross, when those are active or activating a sector of the chart, it's hitting these fundamental questions: body, soul. What is this meeting between earth and the heavens, the soul and the body? And these are ancient, poetic, almost unanswerable things. I have my theories and philosophies, but I do think astrology is part of that process for me, because it's the external, which is the movement of the heavens and the stars in the sky. This might be the moon, the body, right? And then it's the internal, which is the language we use to process and interpret that movement of the heavens. And so the astrological practice itself, astrology as a set of techniques, is a part of this answering this sun and moon meeting, the soul and the body meeting. And so it's a huge theme this week. You get it not only with this full moon, but then when the nodes shift, these kind of deeper questions about soul and body and purpose come to Mars and Venus and relationship. The other thing I'll just say about this is that we look at this nodal cycle. So it happens the last time, 2004, 2005, around this zone, when many of the social media companies that we now use every day were founded or in their gestation phase. Facebook was founded, YouTube was founded. I think Twitter comes later, and YouTube even might be a little later. But the thing is, this nodal transit doesn't leave Mars and Venus. Even after this period, it goes into a Libra-Aries axis. And so we're still dealing with relationship. That part of the cycle back in the aughts was when all of the social media companies, the ones that weren't founded during the during the Taurus Scorpio transit, the other ones were founded during the Aries Libra transit. So we're, but what did social media do? It was like, who are we? How do we relate? it transformed that. The cycle before was in the 80s, but the one before that was in the 60s. And so this nodal transit climaxed with the summer of love. The first half of 1967 was when you had nodes still in Taurus and Scorpio. And I think that whole period, there were questions about how do you relate. People were, with media coming online, there was alternative lifestyles, alternative ways, commune living, all kinds of questions about relationship. How do we live? How do we live well with other people, emerge in this 60s moment? And in America, I know I'm a little bit America-centric here, but it's the theme that's important. So this theme of proper living and proper structure for relating, it's very much in play now and will be for quite some time. Let's just keep going through. So I say ancient texts elevate the lights in many ways. I talked about that in the beginning of the talk. I talked about how the other planets modify, and that the sun and moon are kind of the basis, the body of the spirit, the kind of rooted, tangible parts of the chart. A lot of astrologers say, what's your big three? It's a modern astrological technique. Well, that's the ascendant, which we know is so important because the houses are derived from the ascendant, but then the sun and moon. That's the big three: ascendant, sun, and moon. And so these luminaries are included in that analysis as kind of a first point of focus for a lot of astrologers. Other ancient astrologers might say, well, let's pick the sun or the moon. If you're born during the day, the sun may be the most important luminary. If you're born at night, it's maybe the moon. So either way, they're kind of foundational points in a nativity, in a chart, to begin examining what's happening with a person and with their nativity. So let's just come out here. The other thing I want to say is that Cancer is so important. And we're here now, Sun in Capricorn, Moon in Cancer. I know this is I'm kind of going on a little bit here, and I'll speed this up, but it's heavy, and there's a lot of important points here. In the Thema Mundi, which is the birth chart of the universe that ancient astrologers used as a teaching tool, some say astrologers invented this as a teaching tool rather than it being a true birth chart of the universe. Either way, it symbolically steps in as some kind of root chart for everything. You have Cancer rising, and Capricorn is in the 7th house. And so this idea that Cancer and Capricorn, they're both cardinal signs of initiation and beginning, are the kind of foundation points of this chart that we use for as a stand-in for the birth of the universe. And so every time you have a Capricorn ingress of the sun, the first full moon after that Capricorn ingress is always in Cancer. And that is that time we celebrate the newness, Saturnalia, or in our contemporary time, we celebrate New Year, always when the sun is in Capricorn, initiating something new, the cardinal sign. This full moon is the full moon that every year comes in this period of initiation that is the new year. And so that's another reason why we're dealing with fundamental energies this week. The luminaries, the body, the soul, but then these cardinal signs of initiation where the luminaries are now embedded. And so it's a very important symbolic week, and I would say bring it to how's your 2022 going? Maybe this is the full moon where we're really leaning in now to and getting adjusted to it a little bit more. Now we do have Venus and Mercury retrograde, so that is still causing some issues. That clears up here towards the end of January. But maybe this syzygy, this full moon, can kind of propel you energetically with some of the planning that you're doing while these planets are retrograde, or some of the clarity about how you want to get into this year and what you want to initiate in this year while you have this cardinal syzygy with the full moon in Cancer. Okay, let me see here. Fixed signs are now also heavily activated in 2022. I wanted to mention that because you have Saturn in Aquarius, but now the lunar nodes join the fixed axis. And so all of you fixed heavy people, just know that this is some intense fated time. Saturn grinds through a modality, and it's teaching us something, maybe harder lessons at times, but there may be lessons around discipline and focus and longevity that Saturn in Aquarius is providing you. Now the nodes come in and give a kind of a faded or spiritualized lesson in Taurus Scorpio. Again, maybe our fixed underlying ways of relating to people are now in play there. And so this is going to be a grind. It's a theme for all of 2022 and into 2023. Saturn doesn't leave Aquarius until March 2023, and the nodes don't leave fixed signs until, I don't have this date. I'm just writing about the astrology of 2023, but I think it's mid-year. It may be May, June. But the last eclipse I know is October 2023, that lunar eclipse in Taurus. So fixed signs, just hang on. It's your time, really, is one way to think about it. I think about this often when you have, doubling up of these longer term planets, particularly Saturn and the nodes in the same modality. It's your time. It's your time to use this activation to get into the dynamic activation that is this hard aspect, a square or an opposition, and just go with these changes that reality wants to give you. So, okay, let me come back here. Aquarius season starts, so now we're getting to the end of the week. That's Tuesday. Thursday, the sun comes into Aquarius, 3:30 Central Europe. And so we start Aquarius season, we're done with Capricorn season. It brings more focus to the fixed signs. And we're going to have some moments here in January and early February where we're going to have 6 of the 7 traditionals in fixed signs ruled by Saturn. This actually doesn't change that. It's when Mars comes into Capricorn, and you'll have a bunch of Capricorn and Aquarius planets over the next period. Let me just I'll be talking about that more, but let me come back here. And then on Sunday, we get the cazimi of the Sun and Mercury together here in Aquarius. And I really love this cazimi. Mercury retrograde's halfway done. Whatever intensities were brought up for you, a lot of people have been talking about that on Twitter over the last few days. By the end of this week, we're already halfway through. So I think about the opportunities of Mercury in Aquarius and how good of a placement that is for any of the mercurial qualities and techniques and skills, that having the Sun purify Mercury here is going to be a cool opportunity, I think. And sets us up again, the second half of a Mercury retrograde. Anytime Mercury is after its inferior conjunction, it almost is kind of now preparing for, getting ready to act, and things can get easier. I often tell people, if you have to elect to do something in a Mercury retrograde, wait until the inferior conjunction or after, because it's this phase where it's being reborn as a morning star. Even wait until it's actually visible would be ideal. As a morning star, even if it's still retrograde. But that doesn't happen this week, I don't believe. So let's come back here. That's the week. These are the aspects of the week. It's a huge, gigantic, climactic full moon on Tuesday with the nodal shift happening the same day. And I do think this week may be before and after, with a little bit of activation here on the weekend. It brings us deeper into this Aquarian moment with the sun coming there. Okay, let's shift to the moon. Let's see if I can move through this a little faster. I had to talk about all that stuff. It's really interesting to me, and maybe that's too much sun-moon focus there, but it's what this week is bringing us, and maybe you can find it useful. I hope you do. So let's come back here. What's the moon doing? I'll try to shorten this up a little bit. We start with the Cancer moon. I've already talked so much about that. The moon enters Leo hours after the full moon on Tuesday. It's maybe 4 hours after that full moon, the moon will come into Leo. That will be now a Leo moon squaring the lunar nodes, and then opposite Saturn. So look for, right out of the gate, some early dynamic lunar activation. The moon as a trigger, triggering up that fixed axis. We're going to get a big dose of that here this week, right out of the gate, with like I said here, the Leo moon. Then we have Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Europe, we get a Virgo moon. During that Leo moon, I just want to point out, there is a malefic enclosure and an opposition to Saturn. And so that's where it's under pressure most weeks. I haven't really been wanting to use the malefic enclosure charts as the charts I dive into, but I'm trying to point them out here just so you can be aware of that. I mean, it's the whole Leo moon transit, but look when it's separating, when it's making aspects to Mars and Saturn, there's going to be moments this week where it's really under pressure there. And so let me see here. Oh, and the ruler of the sun is averse. So the sun doesn't enter Aquarius until after the moon leaves Leo. And so that whole transit through Leo, the moon does not have the support of the sun by aspect. And that it's even, more challenging, I think, here for the moon while it's in Leo. We get relief from that again Thursday, 3 p.m. in Central Europe. This Virgo moon has a lovely benefic enclosure, and it's the first mutable moon without the nodes in mutable signs. I think this is going to help us access our mutable powers for the first time in ways that we maybe haven't been able to with those nodes there. It may be more of a settled energy. And I know for me, Mars is currently in Sagittarius. My gosh, I always forget when Mars hits these mutable signs, my life goes berserk with busyness and being overwhelmed. And I've got a whole dose of that the last couple of weeks. And so I'm really happy that with the nodes leaving mutable signs, I think that can take pressure off that Mars and the activity that it's generating. And so I'm looking forward to settling in with these mutable transits without having that nodal, wonkiness or reverberation of these kind of intensities that the nodes can bring. And this Virgo moon is going to be really, really nice. Now, it is ruled by a retrograde Mercury, but it's still, I think, we're getting in and feeling the potency of the mutability. What is Virgo? It can be the detail orientation around the home life, around the body, where we focus in and analyze those types of topics, relationships. So it's good for those things. Let me see here. Then I'm going to go here. Boom, boom. Mars is squaring from Sagittarius. So that Mars square to Virgo is still part of the moon's transit in Virgo. I think that may exacerbate still some of the edginess of this moon. Then the final moon I really love. This happens on Saturday, 11 p.m. Central Europe. We get this first part of Libra moon, and it closes the week. And this is just as Venus is in the degree of its direct station. So Venus is now here in that degree of its direct station, still ruling the Virgo moon. It's a very powerful Venus, and we're feeling that power. Venus will receive the moon by a square. So that's a little bit of the moon this week. It's a waning moon. It's always worth noting that we're decreasing things and trying to maybe let go of things during this week in this lunar cycle. It's perfect for a retrograde. While we have 2 retrogrades active, we have a waning moon. This may even feel more of like settling down and resting and pausing than last week, because last week we had this waxing moon all week, climaxing with the full moon that kicks off the beginning of this week. Okay, 2 charts. First chart I want to look at, this is the full moon. If you check it here, you can see it's opposite the sun, and the full moon is in its own sign, Cancer. And so it's very supportive of all of the maternalism that I described earlier. But look where the sun is. It's with Pluto within a degree, or just about within 2 degrees. And I think this Plutonic theme is a big one. I did a talk with Annabelle Gatt on her podcast this week. That's available only on her Patreon, but we had a great talk about Pluto in Capricorn and that long Pluto and Capricorn cycle. And I think this week with the Sun-Pluto conjunction, it's actually helping illuminate this Pluto and Capricorn transit, which ends. This is the last full year of Pluto and Capricorn. That begins ending starting next year. And so we can think about 2008 to now, Pluto's movement through Capricorn. I think this syzygy is an opportunity to consider the depths of our reality. It fits with the sun and moon theme. The sun and moon are the kind of bedrock of the reality, body and soul. With Pluto, it's like even deeper, even more serious considerations and deep, thoughtful kind of exposures around the body and the soul of you and your life, but of also the collective. We were talking on her podcast about the Pluto return of America, which is a big part of 2022. It's a triple pass Pluto return, and it's in February, I think July, it's June or July, and December. And so all year, America, which I know, I don't want to be too America-centric, but America is one of the seats of a major power. And so with this Pluto return happening, I think we're in for some changes geopolitically because of that. And it's in the 2nd house if you use the Sibley chart, which is a house of resource and a house of money. And that might be something to consider, that there's changes in the monetary system. Of course, we know with the digitization, the rise of crypto and things like that, the rise of inflation that's happening. I think there's some big changes coming money-wise. That's more of a mundane delineation. That's not really the purpose of this particular video that I offer every week, but it's good to mention it. So you have this full moon, and what happens is it highlights that Sun, Pluto and Capricorn, because it's so closely embedded in the 2 lights here. Venus and Jupiter are exchanging terms in this chart. So Venus is in Jupiter's Egyptian term, and Jupiter is in Venus's Egyptian terms here in the early degrees of Pisces. And so they're making a sextile by sign as well. So there's this very much a supportive exchange between Jupiter and Venus happening in this chart. And I love that and then both aspect the moon. So the Venus is opposite the moon. Jupiter is sending that overcoming water trine to the moon. This is that first Cancer moon with Jupiter now in Pisces this time, with the syzygy, with Venus and Jupiter, teaming up here in an auspicious way. So you might want to lean in. I think this fits very much with what I have here, home life and the new home of our age and our moment. I have been feeling this so tangibly. It's finally hitting me like, okay, this is a big new reality and I'm getting really excited. I feel there's a lot of unknowns right now about the rest of this decade or this next mid part of this decade. But I'm finally thinking, wow, I think the upheavals of the crisis, some of that seems to be settling a little bit. And I think the collective is going to start this year, especially with this Pisces moment. It really is a time of like cleansing, healing, washing away these healing waters of Jupiter and Neptune and Venus and Pisces in April, clearing some of this stuff away that we've just gone through, the traumas of it. You know, I've just realized how traumatized I've been, in a way, shocked about all these changes in the world and all the stuff I had to go through to get where I am. So many changes. And I'm finally in a place where it's like, oh, there's a little bit of rest that can be done. And I'm feeling that opportunities and the unknowns now, that the intensity of the crisis is cleared away. I think this is, and so what's important when you're healing from like shock or traumatic events is you want to get to a point where you can settle into back to the body with awareness and the home and the comfort. And that's what I think I see here in this syzygy, is that there is a climax here of this home and comfort with Jupiter and Pisces sending that trine, and then Venus and Jupiter exchanging. And with the Venus side, it's like, again, what makes you feel good? The moon and Venus are so good together, because the moon is maybe more about the home side of comfort. Are you safe? Do you have what you need? Do you have food? Do you have shelter? But Venus is like, okay, now that you have that first layer satisfied, what can you do to make it feel even better? You know, it's like, is it drab? Do you want to put some colors on the wall? Do you want to sing? What can you do to generate some joy? And that's what I think and then Jupiter comes and it's like, let's get even a larger dose of that. And that's why I love this particular syzygy. Mars, Saturn, averse, no Mars, Saturn involved. The nodes, averse. So you're dealing with some real opportunities for this Cancerian settlement of, you know, expansive pleasure as we home into this 2022 and beyond, because I just think that this feels very, again, to go back to the theme of Mundi, Cancer, Capricorn. These are the signs of initiation. It's this time of year where we're initiating and starting things afresh. And with all of the big change with Jupiter into Pisces and the node shifting, there is a freshness here. And this syzygy feels very supportive of that. Let me come back, but auspiciously supportive, like the kind of pleasurable, grounded, homed freshness from which we can launch into the changes we want to make. The other thing here, yeah, I've got that. I mentioned that already. I just initiations into the new year via the solar cycle as a metaphor for the new age we've entered. I think I just covered that, but I just want to say it again, is that the solar cycle, every year you have a new moon in Capricorn, and then you have a full moon in Cancer every year, right when the sun, after that winter solstice, the next full moon is a full moon in Cancer. So there's an initiation. The winter solstice itself is an initiation. This full moon syzygy is a secondary component of that initiation, which always runs concomitant with the winter solstice. And we're here now. And I just have here heavy, these are kind of heavy themes, Cancer and Capricorn, heavy duty energies. Pluto, heavy, deep depth, depth charge, like a deep depth charge with Pluto. But life is heavy by nature. And for me, I don't feel like the benefic energies can be accessed fully without plumbing the depths, whether that's plutonic or whether that is just malefic, deep dives. Only through knowing what it's like, for example, to not have resources or to struggle or to be on the edge of poverty or the edge of homelessness, I think can one really appreciate being housed and being in a home. I speak from experience. There's times in my life, made some bad choices and run out of money and don't have a job, and that hustle just to being on the edge of reality, it's allowed me in my 20s at times, has very much allowed me to kind of be so appreciative of the things I have now that are so far from that. So, all right, so that's the full moon. That's the syzygy here. Tuesday, 12:50 a.m. on Tuesday in Central Europe. The next chart I want to look at is the transit of the week, the moon in the early degrees of Libra. I picked this because I just love it. I love some things about this. I already spoke a little bit about it, but you've got in this chart, the moon is received by Venus. So Venus is retrograde, but in the degree that it will station, so it's gaining power. I think about planetary stations as when the planet enters the degree, particularly the direct station, it's starting to have the auspicious charge that a station can bring in that direct station. It's the promise of movement ahead. And so we're here, boy, by the time we get to this weekend with this Libra moon, I think it's a restful Libra moon, it's a waning Libra moon, and it's very much a kind of a gratitude for this Venus retrograde. And what have you purged? What have you let go of relationally, creatively? Here, I think we can kind of, I think about gratitude as a waning sometimes, because it's like, thank you, I just want to rest in what I have, rest on the laurels a little bit with some thankfulness. It's kind of a decrease moment. And so I think this is a moon of gratitude, and it's a moment of gratitude. The other thing I like about it is it's exactly trining, if you get it in the early degrees, to applying to the cazimi, the Mercury-Sun conjunction in those early degrees of Aquarius. Mercury is in its own Egyptian term, and so this is very auspicious for Mercury as it gets purified at the inferior conjunction, that you'll have the moon applying to it directly. And so I think this transit to me might be like the climax of retrograde winter, is what I called it on Twitter, where you have the inferior, it's the cazimi and then the direct station of Venus simultaneous. And so I've got some construction here, bear with that. I'm just going to try to finish here. Hopefully the mic won't pick up that saw too much. This is part of the Mars and Sagittarius transit for me. It's construction out of this window, construction out of this window. And it's fine, you know, people need to build, people need to create, but it's created another era of just kind of ruckus and kind of out of control movement in my particular situation. But, you know, anyhow, I've got a big smile, no matter, it's all good, life is good. I'm happy that people are building and out there and have, you know, activity going, projects. It's always good to have projects. That's one of the good things about Mars and Sagittarius. It's like you have a lot of stuff going on to do with that Mars and Sagittarius energy, and I know I have been. So okay, let's shift now. The next slide, this is a similar slide. It's the transit of the week. It's sextile to Mars. I like that about now you get the sextile between Libra and Sagittarius, Mars and Sagittarius, and look where Mars now, it's now in its Egyptian terms. And Mars is making and then the moon makes a sextile to Saturn. But this Mars being in its Egyptian terms in Sagittarius, I think is very auspicious for however destabilizing Mars in Sagittarius has been. Maybe now some of the intensities of movement can come into like kind of coagulate or cohere in these final degrees of Mars in Sagittarius. Much of this week this happens, and so and on the weekend for sure. So look forward to the kind of prize at the end of the activity here with Mars getting some power. Maybe some projects will complete, or there'll be a finish line, like I said here. And I just want to mention here, sometimes I need to add additional context. For example, last week's video, I did pick the transit of the week was the Cancer moon applying to Jupiter. However, the moon then came into a beneficent closure in Cancer when I looked later, and that maybe would be something I regret not mentioning. But I was able to tweet it out. So if you have Twitter, you can always follow my feed. I'm talking about the stuff I talk in these videos, but there's different context sometimes and different ideas as they come to me. And so I just wanted to mention that here. All right, the final thing I just want to say is that this Mercury cazimi happens conjoined the fixed star Alshane. This fixed star is in a constellation called Aquila, which this is the eagle, it's Aquila. This was the constellation activated by the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. It's a constellation that will be activated by Pluto's ingress into Aquarius, or Pluto's run all through early Aquarius over the next few years, activates this constellation of these fixed stars. And I think it's a perfect metaphor for our time. As we think about technology, that humanity is on the verge of big technological upgrades, even just the fact that I'm sending this out all over the world, this is part of the technological upgrades of the last 40 years. There's biotechnology, there is internet technology, there's all kinds of technological stuff coming down the pipe. And this is the message of this constellation. This is the eagle that was chewing the liver of Prometheus out, that Zeus sent to punish Prometheus for delivering to humanity fire. And so it's kind of a warning and a promise, but it raises these issues of, is our technology freeing us how will we ensure that we use the technology to, keep ourselves both advancing as a collective and personally, but at the same time, are we being careful about those dangers? And I think the cell phone and the internet's a perfect example, because what a beautiful thing to have the Library of Alexandria at your fingertips. But what about cell phone addiction? What about attention mining by for-profit companies that kind of invade our attention spans? There's the kind of downsides where maybe we're trapped by the technology. And these are the themes of this constellation. Maybe you can think about this week. How's your internet diet? How is your social media diet? Are there things you may want to tweak with that cazimi of Mercury? Sometimes I think about true thought. Deep thought requires a removal from technology sometimes. It's really the kind of true thinking that we can do when we're separated out from it. Inspiration can come, I find, when I'm sleeping. As I wake up, there's an inspiration and I've got to write the notes down. If you're walking, or deep thinking sometimes can be a very human and creative thing that the technology maybe can prevent us from doing. But on the other hand, we have I want to get new words or find new ideas. It's all here. So there's this kind of balance we're going to have to strike. And I think this cazimi moment, this transit of the week as the moon trines this cazimi, is a real opportunity to do some of that work. Okay, let's move on to the final thing I do in the video. Let's throw the tarot card and let's just see if we can get this additional set of symbols. This is the card. Okay, it is the, let me see here. Let's get this up. It is the Three of Hearts, gladness. Love the card gladness, and I love this Three of Hearts, Three of Cups if you're following along with your own tarot deck. This is that symbol of people dancing, holding the cups. It's this kind of joyous party here. I call it gladness. You've got Mercury there in Cancer. This is the middle decan of Cancer. The syzygy is not in the middle decan, it is in the last decan. But we might, for all intents and purposes, talk about Mercury in Cancer and the way that this is actually pretty profound. I don't know if I want to launch into this here because I don't have a lot of time, but the role that Mercury can play right here in this middle decan, it's where Sirius is currently. Of course, the fixed stars move 1 degree every 72 years, but this middle part of Cancer is where Sirius is coming into the reality. Mercury is a planet of magic. I find this to be quite magical part of the sky, and I think it has to do with Mother Gaia and the idea of the moon being what we're encased in. And we use the moon for magic. We use Mercury for magic. In the ancient texts, the moon rules foresight, according to Vedic Valens. Mercury rules all forms of divination. And so there's this kind of very magical component to Cancer. And I think about just the magic of being born. I mean, think about when we come out of a womb and we just wake up and start crying instantly, and then they put us in the swaddle and then we're here as a human being. I mean, that's so tripped out and magical that I kind of think about the role of the mother and the child as being this almost magical soul connection. It's from one you get two. Literally, it's like the physical form of one then changes to create another. So it's some of the most profound magic there is when you start talking about Cancer and the moon, and Mercury being that magical planet of it. Maybe we're more actively working with it here. And I don't know, this syzygy, I think this could be a good one if you're doing a full moon ritual. And I certainly would consider this kind of divine component, this moment of incarnation, and the kind of sort of the mother matrix. If it's digital, the digital projection, whatever it is, we do have this kind of mothering matrix that can be so mothering at times. If you've ever prayed to deities that are feminine or female, you can really feel that kind of spiritual encasement that can happen so often, and that makes me feel joy. I think it also speaks to the Jupiter sextile with Venus now, as Venus is stationing direct in that exchange of terms, how that's so happy and joyful, like I was talking about. Okay, so I'm going to end it there. Have a wonderful week ahead. Thank you for being here. This is S.J. Anderson. Thank you for being here, and thank you for coming to my channel. You can support me by liking this video or subscribing to the channel. You can always go to my website, sjanderson144.com, and schedule an astrology reading, or you can support my Patreon. Helps keep these videos going. Have an awesome day. Talk soon.